I have never really understood why political parties and governments act in the interests of big business rather than in the interests of the consuming public. After all, consumers are voters who elect governments and to whom parties and governments owe their first allegiance in a genuine democracy. The English word democracy has Greek roots. Kratos means rule or power, and demos means the people. And democracy means rule by the people or power for the people. But maybe I do understand. For he who pays the piper calls the tune. Political parties and governments act in the interest of those who fund them, those who make political donations and campaign contributions. Maybe what we really have is an oligarchy, which means a rule by the few, or a plutocracy, ruled by the wealthy. Last week I argued that any Jamaican government claim that they seek a balance between having a healthy environment and economic development, such a claim is false, as lucrative, environmentally damaging enterprises will always get the go-ahead, and that any claim, I said last week, to be seeking a balance between lives and livelihoods is only a pretense, as corporate profits will always be more important than human life and welfare. This week, I have two more examples to prove my point. I grew up, as most of you would have, paying my utility bills at branch offices of the utility companies. The cost of operating those branch offices was included in the water rates and electricity costs, electricity charges, and I paid no additional fees for the right to settle my utility bill. One day, somebody decided it would be more cost-effective for utility companies to close most of their branch offices and to franchise bill payments to private companies. The utility companies saved a lot when they closed those customer service offices, not having to pay salaries, rent, etc. But then, when I went to pay my utility bills at these private companies, I was asked to pay a service charge. Why? I asked myself. Closing all those branch offices was to the profit of the utility companies, and I was deprived of my customary rights of paying my utility bills without additional charge. It is the responsibility of the utility companies to make it worth the while of the private bill payment companies to collect their money for them. In effect, when I pay this service charge, I am rewarding the utility companies for closing their offices, and in addition to paying them for the water or the electricity I use, I am also paying the cost of collecting their money, which is their business cost. In whose interest does the government operate? The rate-paying public or the utility companies and bill payment agencies? Should not the government put regulations in place to protect those who voted for them? Or should the government act to increase private sector profits at the expense of the public? You tell me. At the time those fees were introduced, I lodged my complaints in my column in the Gleaner, but to no avail. The truth is that the government is too close to the utility companies and too close to the bill payment agencies. Let us now talk about bank charges. My first encounter with a bank was at the age of 5, when my father took me under the guango tree in Ligini to open my first savings account. Subsequently, the branch moved across the road, and the Minister of Agriculture chopped down the guango tree. But more than 60 years later, I still use the same branch to do my banking. Some people like to talk about rights Well, let me talk about banking rights now. Over the years, I have developed customary rights as a customer to go into the branch to conduct my business. I make deposits and they pay me interest. It is true that I get a lower rate today than they used to pay me. And I also pay stamp duty to the government on my withdrawals. Now, my bank wants to change our customary relationship, where they wish to charge me to put my money in and charge me to take my money out. They are supposed to be happy to take my savings and deposits and invest them to make their substantial profits. What has changed? Maybe they have lost interest in my small money and wish only to deal with the plutocrats. In whose interest does the government operate? The small savers or the banks and other deposit-taking institutions? It is basic economics that high rates of savings increase the amount of capital available for investment and leads to higher national economic growth. Governments are supposed to want more people to open bank accounts and enter the formal economy. Governments are supposed to want more people to save more money in the formal system rather than put their money under the mattresses. Should not government put regulations in place to protect the banking public who voted for them? Is all they can do is to try to persuade the banks not to introduce these charges? We know that political parties want private companies to make plenty money so that they can give them big donations. This is how our political system works. It really is about money. The private sector is happy and the politicians are happy. It's almost a perfect symbiosis. Prices are high so that companies can make enough money to kick back some to the political parties and still support the high lifestyle of the company directors. We pay for this every time we go to the shopping plaza or supermarket. And this is why we cannot look to the private sector to pressure the government to bring an end to corruption. Why? Because it takes two to be corrupt. And this is also why both political parties must protect the confidentiality of the process of political donations, as neither the politicians nor the private sector wants transparency. We will continue to rise in the global corruption rankings with this sort of philosophy. When political parties and big business join forces to maximize the spoils, it is we, the consumers, who suffer, as well as the natural environment. It may even cost us our lives.